Welcome to the Hastings Shadmehry Show with your hosts, Andee Hastings and Mali Shadmehry. Dive into the heart of family law as Andee and Mali bring clarity to legal challenges, celebrate client victories, and share the wisdom of their combined expertise. Get ready for a journey into empowerment and advocacy right here where your story matters.
Hello, and welcome to the Hastings Shadmehry Show, where we delve into the heart of family law and the stories that shape our lives. I'm Mali Shadmehry, and joining me is the ever-insightful Andee Hastings. How are you today, Andee?
I'm doing well, Mali. How are you?
Doing great. Ready to get going on these awesome topics we have planned for today. But of course, first, I'm going to ask, Andee, today, are you feeling like a warrior or a diplomat?
Today, I'm definitely feeling like a warrior. I'm dealing with a lot of people close to me and my clients who are constantly battling narcissists. And the gaslighting, the projecting of behavior, it inspires my protective nature. And so that's where my head and heart are right now.
I love that.
How about you?
I'll say for the record, I love warrior Andee. That's what I love. Because my answer is, of course, I feel like a warrior today, and here's why. Same, dealing with some of the stuff we've seen with some narcissism and people we're dealing with here, but also I have a huge trial coming up, and I am so excited for it. Truly I am. I've been working on this case for over a year, and it's time to conclude this. It's time to get my client divorced. And, you know, we've got the other party trying to fight for custody and all these things. My client asked me the other day, because I think she was looking for, she wants to feel safe. And like you, I'm a protector. That just drives me every day. And she said, Mali, what's going through your head right now as we're prepping? And I could tell she wanted to hear, like she wanted to feel safe. And I said, well, as we get closer and closer to trial, and I see the stances the other side's taking that maybe I don't feel is appropriate, I feel like I'm a lion that hasn't eaten in over a year, and someone has dangled raw meat in front of my face, and I am going to obliterate it and devour it. That's what I feel like. That's why I feel like a warrior, and I am ready for trial, baby. Ready to go.
Always.
Always. So we are going to be talking today about the marital residence. What do people want to do with the marital residence in a divorce? And what are the most common issues we see arise pertaining to the marital residence? So Andee, let's get started on that. Talk to us. What are the issues that we see pertaining to marital residence in a divorce case?
Well, I think that's a question that, excuse me, that a lot of our clients come in, they're fearful. They want to hold on to the residence for a variety of reasons. They want to get rid of it for a variety of reasons. And but that's a question that people ask us a lot. What's going to happen with the home? And in Georgia, we have equitable division of marital property. It's different from other states. Equitable does not mean equal. It can, but not necessarily. That's the law. And the judge ultimately has the authority to consider certain factors when dividing the marital home as part of the overall picture of the assets. And that's where having a skilled lawyer really comes into play in understanding what factors the judge is going to look at. Yep. And the different ways I think that a house can be disposed of, so to speak, or handled in the divorce case.
So I want to add to that. When we're talking about this concept of equitable, and that means not equal, in Georgia, we are an equitable division state, like Andee said, which means fair division. Equitable means fair. So we are not an automatic 50-50 division state. We are an equitable division state. Again, equitable meaning fair. And how can the court determine what is fair? As I think you were saying, Andee, there's different factors the court can consider. And what I always tell our clients is the court can consider conduct in determining what is fair, as well as, and conduct is, I think we're going to talk a little about that, about contributions to the marital residence, to the marital estate, to the assets and debts. The court can consider all those things, the parties' behavior throughout the marriage. What were the behaviors that gave rise to us even having this marital residence, and what everybody did to participate? And a lot of times, what I see is that clients are very emotionally attached to the home. And it's why equitable division can be a funky little critter, because you can consider conduct. And to consider conduct and what is fair, there is emotion kind of wrapped up in that. And the marital residence, these homes that we build as humans, that's our safe place. And when your safe place feels threatened, it can create a state of panic. And a lot of times what I feel and see is that my clients have an emotional attachment to the home, where, maybe that's not the wisest business move for them to try to fight for that home. But the emotional side of it, they are sitting there feeling like I will fight to the death simply just to keep my home, my safe place. And one thing I always remind my clients is a good divorce attorney is going to bridge the gap between emotion and business. We're going to help you make smart business decisions when necessary. So let's talk more about that. When we've got somebody that's emotionally tied to a home and we're having these conversations with them, what are the things we talk to them about to educate them on how to make smart business choices about the marital residence?
Well, there's a number of things. First of all, we need to have an understanding of exactly how much it's worth. We need to get it appraised. Unless both sides can agree on what the value is, we need to have information surrounding it. The other factors that the court looks at when dividing a home or any property owned by the parties is the contributions each made to the purchase, the contributions that each made to the maintenance of that asset, the financial circumstances of the parties, the assets and debts that each party is going to be taking with them after the divorce. The custody issues in the case could be a factor. If one parent is retaining primary custody, then there may be an argument there that they should keep the home permanently or for a period of time. So there's just all these factors that we have to look at in order to, without the emotion, that's what clients rely on us for, in order to best present their case to the court. Mm-hmm. And then we have to look at the options of how to handle it. Mm-hmm. And so do you want to talk about some of the ways that we handle marital homes in our cases?
Yes. I'm going to chop it up into some basics here. Because really the conversations about the marital home, they have to start happening with your attorney when you first consult with the attorney. So when I talk to a client, I'm feeling it out. I'm talking about what does your marital estate consist of? And when we talk about real property, which would include a marital residence, I like to get an idea of when the house was purchased, what funds were used to purchase the home. So, for people that are going into a consultation with a divorce attorney, it's smart to go ahead and gather that information if you can. You're going to save money on your consultation that way by being organized with your thoughts. And when you're in a state of stress and you're talking to a divorce attorney for the first time, for a lot of my clients, that's one of the most stressful days of their life. It's when they decided to pick up the phone and make that decision to say, I'm ready to start to get knowledge about what a divorce may look like, and I'm accepting that might be the reality for my family. So it's very nerve-wracking, and it's very common that the client will get sidetracked and emotional during these convos. So you want to gather that information if you can. When did you buy your home? What funds were used to buy the home? How is the mortgage titled? Is it jointly titled between you and your spouse, or is it in one spouse's name versus the others? And I always have to tell people, don't panic if it's titled a certain way. Your lawyer will talk to you about the ins and outs of that. So how's the mortgage titled and how is the deed on the home titled? We want to know those things. Because a house that's purchased prior to the marriage is going to be treated differently than a house that was purchased during the marriage. So we talk about those sorts of things. We start to create a game plan. I'll even get into later in the conversation, usually, how much is your mortgage payment? Because we have to start to visualize, what is life going to look like for this party after the divorce? What are they able to earn? What are they looking at getting in child support and alimony? And if they're going to start a new career, a lot of times, like a stay-at-home mom, for example, is going to have to get back out there and work. You're not living on two incomes anymore, and you might get some alimony and child support, but we need to seriously consider what a court's going to expect of you, which is usually court in Georgia is going to expect you to work if you're capable of working. And so when we're determining what do we want to do with the house in the long run, I need to know, how much does your mortgage cost per month? And if we need to refinance, we'll talk about that, I think, in a moment, are you going to qualify for that to remove the other spouse's name from that mortgage? Talk about that again in a moment. But I also, Andy, you were talking about establishing a value for the home. So you can look at Zillow and all the other things online, but that's not an accurate way in court or really in negotiation to determine what the value of a home is. And one thing that I think is underrated and a lot of attorneys and litigants don't pay much attention to is getting an appraisal in the case. And you need to do that early on, and sometimes not. We want to look at what the market's doing and base it around, when are we negotiating and what's going to be most beneficial for us market-wise when you want to get an appraisal. But the only way to have an efficient negotiation and trial, in my mind, if you're going to not settle after you negotiate, you've got to get an appraisal. You have to get an appraiser that really knows what they're doing and that their appraisal can stand up in court. Even for negotiation, that's important to say, look, we know what the value of this home is. Our appraiser's on point. We have an appraiser that, we use a lot. They're trustworthy. I know that if I don't settle, I can bring them to court to defend their appraisal if I need to. And that is very underrated and very important. You are going to waste so much time and money in your case unless you get the right appraisal right up front so we know a number we're working with, for starters. The other side's usually going to go get their own appraisal. And then it's a battle of the appraisals. And that's why you want to have a great appraiser so they can help educate the lawyer on, how can I dispute why their appraisal's bad and why our number is appropriate? A lot of times we end up averaging the two values in each appraisal. So those are some of the kind of initial things I start talking about with my client. What does life look like for you after the divorce? Can you even afford this home? Are we going to need to refinance? I think we can talk about that now. And let's think about when is the right timing to get an appraisal. Gotta do that. You don't want to be doing that on the eve of your mediation or the eve of your trial. It's a recipe for disaster, and in my experience, waste thousands of dollars just to argue over potential values for a home, when if you just get the right appraisal, it's a constant or a more dependable variable that we can be basing our conversations around. But I want to talk about, what does it look like for a litigant that maybe the mortgage is titled in their joint names, but one party wants to keep the house. What is likely to happen in that situation?
Well, typically, courts view divorces as getting people out of doing business with one another. And so leaving somebody on a mortgage if they're no longer going to have an ownership interest in the house is not usually on the table. Sometimes people will agree to that sort of resolution for a period of time following the divorce. Maybe they want to keep the kids in the house for X amount of time, but refinancing for the party who would otherwise stay in is not feasible or something like that. But when you go to court, typically the options are you either sell it and split the proceeds. And again, splitting does not mean evenly necessarily, because that's subject to equitable division, or one spouse buys the other spouse out. Now, you can balance that out depending on what kinds of assets you have. You can balance out that value potentially with other assets. So maybe the person keeping the house takes less of a different asset. We can get really creative with how we resolve that issue to accomplish our clients' goals. But inevitably, there's going to be a time when if you're keeping the house and your spouse is on the mortgage, you're going to need to refinance it in order to remove that person. That's challenging, like Mali said, if you haven't been working for a while, or if the income you have been earning is not sufficient to meet the requirements of a mortgage lender. So we have lots of ways that we deal with that. We understand how if you're getting alimony and support, the period of time that needs to go by so that a mortgage lender can look at that and consider that as part of your standard income. And those are just the issues that we will walk our clients through and fight for them on at the appropriate times in the case.
Yes, and I would add to that, a lot of times I see one spouse threatening the other spouse. Go figure, spouses threatening each other in a divorce. Yes, that happens every day. And it's scary. Again, that's that emotional piece. You're threatening my safe space, and one spouse is saying, you're not keeping this house. You can't afford it. Well, knowledge is power. So that's what we start with, just educating clients on different options that Andee kind of laid out. And what I'll say is typically what you're going to see is that if you want to keep the house, and we can make a good case for that, the judge would typically say, well, I'm going to give you 3 to 6 months to refinance, somewhere around there, and remove the other spouse's name from this mortgage. Because as Andee said, you guys, the court, and what our goal is when we're dissolving this marriage, it's a business transaction. We are designing a settlement or an outcome at trial that is going to dissolve the business relationship between you two. You're not doing business together anymore unless you're raising kids, then you're co-parenting. But money, finances, the house, all that's separated. It's not feasible for someone to stay on a mortgage with your name. Like, 2 people can't stay on the mortgage anymore. Y'all are divorced. And if you're not paying the mortgage timely, it's going to negatively affect the other spouse's credit, and it's going to create a whole slew of issues. So don't ever agree to just keep your name on a mortgage for all of eternity, but the other spouse gets to keep the house. You're signing yourself up for disaster. So anyway, to promote judicial economy and less arguments in the future, courts want to dissolve the marital estate, the marital unit. And you're going to be given usually 3 to 6 months to refi, remove the other spouse's name from that mortgage. And then if you fail, if you cannot get that refi done to remove their name and pay them out, as Andee said, and the payout is kind of a separate topic. It's just going to depend on what the whole marital estate looks like. And we can balance out other assets to determine what should a payout look like from the house equity, and what's the difference between liquid funds, retirement funds, how does all that work? That's a different convo for a different day. But if you cannot refinance to remove their name, then the court's usually going to require that the house be sold, and we split the proceeds according to how we're splitting everything in the whole marital bucket, if you will, the marital estate. So that's sort of kind of the reality of the house. Another important thing that we try to do with our clients is get them in touch with a mortgage broker very early on. In fact, depending on the case, I'll get my client in touch with my mortgage guy, and he's the best. Maybe I'll see him on here one day. I don't know. I get them in touch with him early on so that he can talk through their options. Like, look, based on your income or like what you're looking at getting with child support, alimony, or whatever it is, I think you might qualify to refi. So it's a good idea to negotiate that way. Or they may say, no, like that's not going to work for you. It's not going to happen. Let's veer away from that. And then emotionally, my client's starting to understand, look, this isn't a reality. And that's how you save money in a divorce case, is having knowledge at the right times as early as possible in your case, so you are not spending money because you are attached emotionally to something that's not feasible. So we get mortgage brokers involved right away. I've had to do it last minute before. You don't want that. You don't want to be sitting in mediation, and that's the first time your client's learning that, guess what? You're not going to qualify. You should not be trying to keep this house. You want to do that early on so that emotionally you can make smarter decisions when it's time to make those decisions in the negotiations or at trial. So what else? What else do we see with the marital residence? What about our cases where the case is still pending and they're still sharing a marital residence? What are the issues affiliated with that?
There's a whole bucket of issues that our clients deal with when they're under the same roof as the person they've either decided to divorce or that has decided they want a divorce. One of the questions we get all the time, I'm sure you do as well, is when can I have them out?
Mm-hmm.
How quickly?
Because it can be extremely toxic for two people that have a divorce pending and living under the same roof. And sometimes when we tell them, like, oh, y'all are going to have to stay under the same roof, except I think we'll get into what do you do to get them out. And it can be expensive to try to get them out during the pendency of the case. My clients are like, whoa, seriously? I got to do that? But yeah, let's talk about that.
There's all kinds of ways that people deal with it. Sometimes it's not economically feasible to sustain 2 households while the divorce is going on. For those people for whom it is, usually the person who wants the divorce is often like, you know what, I'm going to go get another place. I'm not even going to fight this battle. But if we can't come to an agreement on what's going to happen, then we have to have a temporary hearing with the court and seek relief with regards to who has temporary exclusive use and possession of the home. And those factors are more short-term factors. Like, for instance, if you have children and you want to keep them in the stability of the home, the person who is the primary caregiver or is going to continue to be is more likely to remain in the home. We have situations where 50-50 custody People are engaging in 50-50 custody arrangements, and they do something called nesting, where the children stay put in the house, but the parents move out from week to week or whatever the time frame is. There's all kinds of options, but we definitely, that is one thing that we like to